it was in the evening. It was still plenty of daylight, but, it was in the evening time. My dad lived right in that area. That's the reason I was in this area for the last several years before he passed away. And I decided to there's a lot of old hollers and old home places in that area because he grew up in that area. So I went hiking up a trail that we drove horses up once before, but went a different way, and I was going to hike another way. And I got, on the map you see, I was probably out of that field. That's a field that's light green and goes into the woods. That's probably a quarter of a mile, half a mile up in there when it just kind of, I felt like a hair on my neck raising up and kind of a strange feeling. And there was no animals. It was quiet. Didn't hear no insects or frogs or nothing, and I just kept walking. It's a nice warm day. And I heard a ruffling noise, then a grunt. I thought to myself, I snuck up on some deer. So I started looking, and about approximately 50 yards ahead of me was a small knoll and some trees on that knoll. And at the edge of one of the trees was a tall, hairy figure. Approximately, I'm 5'6", so he was probably about at least 2 foot taller than I am from the looks of him. He was not all the way around the tree. He was at the edge of the tree just watching. And he made a few more grunts. And I had a firearm, and I had a large knife, and I had a walking stick. At that time, I realized that I was in the wrong house, and I needed to leave. So I just slowly turned around and started walking back out the trail I went in. I got about halfway out when I heard the ruffling sound to the left of me going out. And I kept looking, never could see nothing. Then I heard another grunt approximately a minute or two later, and I looked, and he's off to the left of me up on a hill, standing beside of another tree looking down at me. This time he looked a little bit taller, but he was probably 20 or 30 yards this time, so he was a little closer. And he never did make an attempt to come toward me or nothing. I say it, but it was a dark, I can't say, it was dark in the woods, so, I'm in a wooded area, but I could tell his hair was dark. I don't know if it was dark brown or a black, but it was dark. Eyes was real. They wasn't really white. You couldn't see. You could see a paler color around the eye area, but you couldn't really tell what color it was, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And once I got on out, I went on back home. And of course, told my dad, and he kind of didn't really laugh about it. Just said, well, you've seen something. Like I said, he grew up there in that area all his life. So, and the more I thought about it through the years, the more I thought about other things, referring to this sighting I'd been. That used to be an old prison camp, and back in the 30s and 40s, and that was actually the largest community in Rockcastle County at that time. It wasn't a city, it was just a little suburb community. It was larger than Mount Vernon, Livingston, and other cities around that area due to the revenue coming in. There was a prison camp there, a quarry, but there's an old railroad grade ran behind where my dad lived. And in that railroad grade and directly behind his trailer, there was a doe that stayed there for years. She would stay right in that area. She wouldn't come right up to you, but you can get within walking distance of her. And she never would leave that area. She never would leave that area. And there'd be nights, certain parts of the year, the horses would be running and yelling and going crazy, and like something was after them, but you go check them and they would be nothing there. And my horses, I'm not bragging on my horses at the time, but my horses didn't scare it much because, there was all kinds of animals that usually stayed in the field with them. I had a fox that lived with them. I had one that wouldn't even pay attention to a snake and stuff like that. And I just never could figure out what made them act like that at certain times. And I never dawned on me why that deer would stay there either in that area. She would never leave. You'd never see her up in that field. You'd see her in the field with the horses, but you never see her in that upper field where I went up that trail at. And that was the first sighting of the things in that area during that time. No, it was still daylight. It was dark in the woods. You know, it wasn't dark. There was enough daylight I could see. I didn't have no flashlights or nothing like that. I could see real good, but, you know, there wasn't a lot of sunlight in the wooded area where I was at, you know, a lot of foliage.
And when you saw the second one, do you think it was the same individual, or could it have been a different one?
Coming out when I seen it, it could have been a second one. I always just assumed that it was following me out to make sure I was leaving, because I didn't hear nothing going out. Then all of a sudden I just heard more rustling, and I looked up, and it was kind of a hill onto the left of me going out and right going in. And I just started hearing some rustling, like something was rustling through the woods. And then I got to a certain point where it grunted, and I looked up and I seen it standing beside of another tree up there, and it looked taller that time. It looked like it was bigger.
And the overall appearance of it, like the silhouette, the shape of it, is there anything that stands out that you remember?
It had a kind of a broader shoulder, more broader than kind of a human. To me, I mean, it looked like it had football pads on. You know, I'm trying to explain it. The shoulders was just more heftier than like a human shoulder. You know, a human shoulder kind of slumped down. This is more built up, healthier. Like its torso, you know, kind of favored more of a human. You know, it had a belly, wasn't very big. Its arms was around waist length, a little longer maybe. You know, compared to its upper torso. The main thing was its shoulders. You know, it was real broad at the shoulders, then it kind of narrowed in.
Anything else that stood out that you remember at all?
Not really. And what really, after I looked back right after it happened, you know, it was quiet. I mean, in that area you hear frogs, you hear birds, you hear crickets, or you hear something always while you was in the woods, something making a noise. But at that point it got quiet, and that's what really got my attention. Then I heard the rustling and a grunt, and I thought, well, maybe it's the deers, and I started looking for deers, and that's when I first seen it.
Did any other behavior, the way it moved or anything like that, can you remember it? Did it do anything?
But I never did see it move, because, like I said, the first time it was just standing at the edge of a tree just watching me. And that's when I realized I'm in the wrong place, I need to leave. And I was kind of turned around and didn't run, but I was walking pretty brisk trying to get out of there, and that's when I heard it again. And when I looked up there this time, it was still there looking around a tree, at the edge of a tree, watching me. And I kind of picked up pace a little bit and kept going.
And did you do anything anything regarding your gun? Did you,
to be honest with you, I even forgot I had it. I was just more worried about getting out there.
Yeah. So then the second sighting was in 2010. Was that the same area?
It was fairly close. There's a large area there we rode horses in, and it was on back towards Livingston more, and not far off from the interstate, but where it was at, you know, you couldn't hear the interstate. It was quite a piece because of the hill and stuff. It was at the bottom of a holler, and we rode horses through there for years. And you come off of what we call Sand Hill here in Rockcastle, down into a holler, which Callaway Branch comes into, the branch itself. And you had to cross the little branch, and you come back out. Well, at this time, they had logged some in that area. Not a lot, but they'd logged some on in that area, a little piece. And as we come up, you come through a cedar thicket, and it comes to an opening on your right where they'd logged. What's to your left was still all heavy wooded. And once we come out to that opening is where, now this one we didn't see. This one we heard, and I can't swear that it was or was not a Sasquatch, but I will explain to you what we did and what we heard, and let you better determine if it's usable or not, or if you want to. But like I said, it was me and a buddy of mine. We rode horses in that area by ourselves and together for years. And that area, I mean, we've been that trail many times. And when we come into that clearing, all of a sudden, off to the right of us in the woods, trees started shaking and a loud grunting. And the horses automatically, they just started shaking and sidestepping and trying to get out of there. And all we could just control the horses. And we kept looking, and that time we did draw our guns, but we never could see what was going on. Nothing ever come out. The trees were shaking, you could hear branches breaking and a loud grunt. And eventually, because we had to cross a couple of trees that was belly length for the horses, so we was trying to watch them so they didn't kill us and kill them, and trying to watch what this was, trying to see if we seen anything. Because we thought, well, first it might have been a bear, but it never did. Usually a bear will try to chase you out of there, or it might have been an elk, but usually an elk in this area, if you see one, it runs off real quick because there ain't very few of them. But we didn't know exactly what it was, but it kind of scared us and scared the horses. We never did see it.
And how far were the trees from you?
Off the trail from where we was at, I'd say they was probably about 30 feet. But it's a heavy, thicketed area. But yeah, it was real close. It was fairly close.
And how big were the trees?
They was probably 3 or 4 inch saplings.
So that area there, how far away from the first sighting would you say?
I'd say approximately no more than 2.5 miles, maybe 3. And how he was riding, it took longer. You had to go kind of like driving on the road, it's not as quick as going a straight line, but,
Well, that's great. I mean, they both sound, the second one does sound like typical Bigfoot behavior. They do shake trees. I've experienced it. It happened to me once. Of course, I've also had many times where trees are pushed over when we're close by. But I've had them shake a large tree, large cedar, in the middle of the cedar thicket.
This is like a pine or cedar thicket that it was in that we come. And I don't know if whatever it was, we rode up on it and startled.
Right.
And it startled us, and we was trying to make our way because the trail from where it was, when you got there, you had to turn to your right, cross there was a couple of trees, like I said, that was belly level to the horses, so they had to cross it touching their belly. And you had to go on out and cut up a hill and go on back around toward the first sighting. Which both sightings was one on one side of the road and one was on the other. Not a main intersection, it's just a country road. But
back to your sightings, the first sighting actually. You mentioned you saw a little bit of the eyes, some color, something in the eyes. Was there anything else you could see in the face or the head?
No, because like I said, he kept trying to stay hid around the tree. I mean, it wasn't like he was just poking his head around. You could see the figure, but it wasn't like completely the figure, but he was like just trying to, his head was bobbing, just trying to, like peeping around not like fully exposing, trying to expose himself, but he kept wanting to stay where he could see me.
It's like he's showing himself enough to try to get you out of there. Like, and you said you're 5'6", and you said he's probably a couple feet taller than you?
Yeah, from 50 yards, he looked like he was at least 7 foot at least. I mean, he was way up on that tree, and I mean, I'm a firefighter, so, you know, I use ladders for pretty much measurement. And I've been a firefighter for 30 years, so, you know, I'm pretty familiar with a ladder. And using a ladder, he looked like he was about 10 or 12 rails up on a ladder on the second one, you know. I'm not saying he was that tall, but, you know, he was in that area. If I put a ladder up there, you know, he's going to be pretty tall just by going by a ladder. I'm 5'6", so he appeared on the first one to be about at least 1.5 feet, maybe 2 foot taller than me. And the second one, which now is a couple of quick glances, because I was in a hurry to get out there. He looked a little taller because he was closer. You know, he's about 30 yards away, 20 to 30 yards away. And the second time I seen him to my left when I was going out. Yeah.
You mentioned you told your dad about it, and he really he didn't laugh, but he didn't. You know, he just kind of acknowledged it, but you know.
Yeah, he didn't act like he was really surprised about it. He didn't actually, you know, laugh and kind of like, yeah, you're seeing things, you know. You know, he kind of like, yeah, you probably saw something, you know. Yeah. You know, just kind of shrugged it off, but, you know, he just acknowledged it, you know.
How old were you at the time?
Let's see, I'm 47 now, so 30-something.
Well, listen, Chuck, I appreciate you sharing that report. I'm going to type it up. I do believe to be 100% credible, legit. From everything you described, it sounds like a typical Bigfoot sighting. You know, a lot of times they will show themselves if they want you to leave an area, if there's a young one nearby or a female. You know, if this is a male, they do get a little protective of the areas. And the tree shaking is typical, you know, behavior as well. So,
right, like I said, the first one, it just he never did really make a sound. He grunted. Keep saying he, but he grunted a few times, both times. First time I seen it, when I was coming out, when I seen it, I could hear the rustling, and he grunted a few times, a deep grunt. And then the second time there was loud grunting, more kind of like a fighting grunt. If that makes sense. Like somebody fighting, and the trees were shaking. And like I said, buddy of mine, I mean, I can have him call you. I can give you his name. But there was two of us that time. You know, it kind of really freaked us out because we didn't know what it was, and it's never acted like anything we've ever seen. You know, I've been deputy sheriff for years and firefighter. And, you know, I've been around more birds has been here and stuff, and they've never acted nothing like that. And I've heard elk and seen elk, which is not very likely around here, but they are around here some.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like an elk. And especially the one you saw, that's, you know, obviously the Sasquatch, because there's no other animal that looks like that. So, yeah, that's a great report, and it's a good area. I've got other reports near there. Like I said, I appreciate you telling me this and coming forward and sharing the locations. I'll type it up. And have you reported this to anybody else ever?
Just a few friends and some family, you know.
Okay. All right. All righty. Well, I'll let you go. Thank you so much, Chuck, for letting me call you and letting me document this.
No, that's no problem.
Thank you so much. If you hear of anything else, just get a hold of me.
I sure will.